Uncle Adenor opened his eyes in the dark, like someone waking before the whole house stirs. The bedroom ceiling was just a patch of shadow over another patch of shadow, without defined contours, without the familiar geometry of the wooden beams he himself had installed. There was no urgency in his awakening. The old carpenter's body knew that hour by heart, a silent internal clock that needed neither winding nor light to signal that the night was in its deepest, quietest stretch. He lay there for a few more minutes, flat on his back against the mattress. His breath flowed in and out slowly, matching the slow, measured rhythm of the sleeping house. The air was cold, that gentle, still cold that gathers in the corners of rooms during the early hours, settling heavily upon the furniture and quiet things. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet nights where someone works slowly while the world sleeps. And sometimes that's all we need to fall asleep too. Perhaps this is just another one of those silent nights where someone works slowly while the world sleeps. And sometimes that's all we need to sleep soundly together. He pulled the wool blanket a little to the side. The thick fabric brushed against the cotton sheet with a rough sound that seemed immense in the absolute stillness of the room. He sat on the edge of the bed, the springs yielding with a muffled groan. His bare feet descended until they met the épais wood floorboards. The wood was icy cold. It was a solid chill that crept up his heels and awakened the nerves of his skin, but he didn't pull his heels back. He liked that sensation of firm ground, of resistant matter beneath him, the certainty that the house remained there, supporting his weight. He sat there, hands flat on his pajama knees, feeling his own bone structure, waiting for his eyes to adjust to the darkness, which little by little ceased to be absolute blackness to reveal the silent silhouettes of the wardrobe and dresser. The plaid flannel shirt hung on the back of the straw chair, exactly where he had left it the night before. Uncle stretched out his right arm, feeling the invisible air until his fingers found the soft, worn fabric. He put on the garment with no haste. The plastic buttons were slipped through their holes one by one, a small automatic task that his calloused hands performed from tactile memory without needing light. The last button, near the frayed collar, was a little loose. The cotton thread gave way by millimeters when he pulled the small disc to fit it into the hole. He noticed the detail, felt the looseness of the stitching, registered the texture of the worn thread, and let his hands fall heavily to his sides. The silence of the room was dense, almost palpable. He could hear his own heart beating in a tranquil rhythm that asked for no haste. He pulled on the brown leather boots that always stood aligned near the foot of the bed, close to the shaggy rug. The leather was stiff from disuse in the past few hours, cold to touch, but it would soon begin to yield to the warmth of his skin and mold itself again to the shape of the feet that had inhabited it for years. Tying the thick laces required bending his spine, a hinge-like movement he performed with respect to his own limits, feeling the pull in his back. Each tug of the waxed cord was accompanied by a long exhalation through his nose. The right boot, the double knot. Then the left boot, the firm bow. The ritual of preparing for the yard before any rooster in the village crowed was a solid foundation upon which he built the rest of the hours to come. He walked down the corridor towards the kitchen. His steps were measured, short, almost shuffling across the floorboards so as not to break the peace of the narrow hallway. The red ceramic tile floor of the kitchen had a different texture from the bedroom's wood, smoother, colder, more impersonal beneath the soles of his boots. On the dining table covered with a plastic tablecloth, the glass oil lamp awaited him. The enameled metal base had small dark oxidation spots that told the tactile tale of hundreds of similar early mornings. He found the cardboard matchbox beside the base, exactly in its usual spot. The sound of the wooden matchstick striking the rough sandpaper was a dry scratch in the house's silence. The spark was born blue, crackled, turned into a tiny yellow flame, and soon found the kerosene-soaked wick. The old carpenter adjusted the small side gear with his thumb and forefinger. The light rose timid first, gaining strength until it painted the white kitchen walls with a warm, aged ochre hue. The pungent, quick smell of burnt match mingled with the sweet, dense, constant aroma of the lamp's fuel. It was the scent of solitary work, the perfume of nameless hours. The flame flickered once inside the transparent glass tube before fully stabilizing, creating a circular dome of light that would accompany him outside, pushing the shadows into the room's corners. The basket was missing. He walked to the utility area attached to the kitchen, holding the oil lamp by its thin wire handle that creaked slightly in its fitting. The wicker basket hung from a thick, rusty nail on the exposed brick wall. It was an old, wide object woven from thick straw that had long lost its original shine and color many seasons ago, taking on the hue of dry earth and tree bark. Uncle Adenor unhooked the handle from the nail with a gentle upward motion. The woven material creaked at the joints, a sound of dry fibers settling as they were moved. The object's weight was almost negligible, light as a handful of air, but its volume was large, spacious, perfect for accommodating the lightness of what the night wind had brought down to the earth. With the light source in one hand and the empty basket in the other, he unlocked the back door. The round iron doorknob was damp, covered by a thin, invisible layer of dew. The solid wooden door yielded with a low, drawn-out groan from hinges that cried for oil. The street air invaded the polished concrete veranda, bringing the damp scent of wet earth, dewy grass, and vegetation resting in the dark. The vast yard was an ocean of shadows, punctuated by the imprecise outlines of shrubs and fences. And there in the back, near the masonry wall, dominating the space with its immense canopy and thick, twisted branches, stood the old fig tree. It was towards there that his feet pointed. It was under that dark canopy that the silent work awaited him. The path from the veranda to the back of the yard was over sparse grass that yielded softly beneath the weight of his boots. With each step, the oil lamp's light swayed gently, making the shadows of smaller plants dance across the ground as if alive. Uncle Adenor was in no hurry. The cold pre-dawn air brushed against his face, awakening his skin, bringing that clean freshness that only exists when the whole world seems to have paused its breath. He smelled the pitong leaves that lined the path, a citrusy and bitter aroma that mingled with the scent of black earth. The fig tree grew before him with each step, an imposing mass of darkness that swallowed the stars just above the wall. Arriving beneath the wide canopy, the temperature seemed to drop another degree. Very old trees create their own climate beneath their branches, holding moisture and blocking heat. He walked to the soapstone bench that stood a few feet from the main trunk. The stone's surface was cold and covered with tiny dewdrops. Carefully, he placed the oil lamp on the right end of the bench. The glass clinked softly against the damp stone. Immediately, the dome of yellow light spread across the packed earth floor around him, revealing the scene of his work. The ground beneath the fig tree was carpeted. A constellation of dry leaves, large, brown, and coppery, covered the dark earth like an uneven, fragmented rug. The old carpenter stood a moment, simply surveying the scope of the work. The wicker basket hung from his left hand, its rough handle brushing against his calloused palm. He didn't use a broom for this. A broom dragged the earth, raised dust, injured the superficial roots the tree insisted on showing, and mixed stones with the foliage. The work here was done by hand, one by one, or in small, delicate handfuls. It was a gesture of gathering, not sweeping. He adjusted the collar of his flannel shirt, feeling the fabric brush against his neck, and stepped forward, entering the circle of light cast by the oil lamp. He bent his knees slowly. His joints cracked with a dry sound that was lost in the vastness of the yard. He didn't fully squat. He kept his legs slightly bent and leaned his torso forward in a posture his back had accepted as natural after so many decades of his trade. He rested the base of the basket on the ground near the toe of his right boot. The wicker made a hollow sound as it touched the earth. With his right hand free, he made the first approach. His thick fingers, with dull nails and old tool marks, descended towards the nearest leaf resting on an exposed root. The first leaf was immense, the size of an open hand. It was dry, curled inward at the edges like a small cardboard canoe that had dried in the sun. He touched it with the tips of his index finger and thumb. The texture was rough, full of prominent veins that formed a complex map on the dead surface. As he lifted it, the leaf made a crisp sound, a minuscule crackle of dried matter breaking the silence. He felt the absolute lightness of that piece of tree that had completed its cycle. The weight was almost an illusion. He moved his hand and dropped the leaf into the empty wicker basket. It fell to the woven bottom with a hollow, dry sound, a soft thwack that echoed within the container. Uncle watched the solitary leaf at the bottom of the basket for a second. Its brown color contrasted with the aged straw of the wicker. It was the first step of a meticulous journey. The air around was still, with no wind to move the other thousands of leaves waiting on the ground. He breathed deeply, smelling the dust and slowly decaying organic matter rising from the damp earth. His right hand returned to the ground. This time, his fingers spread a little wider, encompassing 3 smaller leaves that lay overlapped near a limestone rock. He slid his fingertips under the small pile, feeling the chill of the packed earth on his nails, and lifted the cluster. The leaves scraped against each other, a whisper of crumpled paper. The gesture was repeated. Lift, move his arm over the basket opening, open his fingers, and let them fall. The 3 leaves joined the first, covering the woven bottom. The The sound of their fall was a little more muffled now that there was an initial bed to receive them. The rhythm began to take shape in his body. It was an imperceptible sway. His hand descended, gathered, rose, released. With each movement, his torso yielded a little more, finding the perfect axis of balance so not to tire his lower back too quickly. He took a minuscule step to the left, dragging his boot, nudged the basket with the side of his foot, and continued. The oil lamp's light illuminated the back of his hand with each descent, highlighting the prominent veins and dark spots of his aged skin. The night was only just beginning to accept the presence of that patient gatherer under the giant tree. The work continued through his hands, establishing a gentle cadence that seemed to hypnotize time itself. Lower his hand, feel the dry leaves, pick up the dry fragments, raise his arm, release into the basket. The sound of the basket filling changed gradually. What was once a hollow thud against the bare straw was now a soft rustle, a whisper of leaves falling upon leaves, like the sound of very fine rain tapping on a distant tin roof. Uncle Adenor didn't count how many he gathered. The count didn't matter. What mattered was the patch of dark earth that reappeared from beneath the dead carpet, clean and unhindered, breathing the cold pre-dawn air. His right hand found a denser cluster near the main trunk. There the humidity was greater, and some leaves at the bottom of the pile were more flexible, almost pasty, stuck together by several nights' dew. He needed to use his fingertips like a gentle rake to detach the damp mass from the tree's rough bark. The scent that rose from this small, disturbed mound was strong, an aura of dense woods, of mushrooms and old rain. He rubbed his thumb against his forefinger to remove a piece of wet earth that had stuck to his skin, feeling the fine sand lightly scratch his fingerprint. His gaze fixed on a specific leaf caught in an abandoned spider web just above the ground between two thick roots. The leaf swayed gently, suspended by an invisible thread, reflecting the oil lamp's yellow light. Its shape was perfect, without tears at the edges, with veins drawing a straight, symmetrical spine down the middle. As he looked at that symmetry, a short, silent memory crossed the old carpenter's mind. Teresa used to say that trees didn't lose their leaves out of weakness, but out of wisdom. She would say this, leaning against the kitchen door frame, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand, looking at this very fig tree on a distant autumn day. He remembered the tone of her voice, calm and unaffected. She said the tree needed to shed its dead weight so the branches wouldn't break in August winds, that a leaf falling wasn't a waste, it was a payment the tree made to the earth that sustained it. He had smiled then, finding her wife's practical poetry beautiful, while sanding a pine drawer on the veranda. Now, with his fingers touching the leaf suspended in the web, he felt the texture of that wisdom. The leaf detached from the web with a minimal tug, yielding without resistance, and landed in the basket with the others. The memory of Teresa brought no tightness to his chest, just the same warm presence the oil lamp offered at his back. The basket was already 1/3 full. The volume increased quickly as the dry leaves didn't fit perfectly, They created air pockets among themselves, forming a soft, disordered mountain. He needed to push the pile down with the palm of his open hand, crushing the contents to make space. The sound of crushing was loud, a sharp crackling of dozens of leaves breaking in half, shattering their dried edges. His hand sunk into the crisp brown, feeling the fragile resistance of the matter yield beneath the strength of his arm. As he withdrew his hand, small leaf fragments clung to the hairs on its back.
He took another lateral step, circling the base of the trunk clockwise. His left boot stepped on a macadamia nut that some bird had dropped there, making a round, hard snap under the rubber sole. He paused his movement, adjusted his body's weight so not to slip on the nut's smooth shell, and kicked the small sphere aside towards the masonry wall. The nut rolled across the packed earth until it hit the concrete baseboard with a dull thud. Silence returned immediately, swallowing the small sound as if it had never existed. The oil lamp's light on the stone bench cast long shadows of his legs over the sparse grass that began beyond the fig tree's canopy. The shadows stretched thin and long, disappearing into the darkness of the rest of the yard. He continued the gesture. Pick up, lift, release. Pick up, lift, release. His body no longer felt the effort of bending. His muscles had entered a state of active numbness, accepting repetition as a new form of rest. The oil lamp's smell remained constant, mingling with the scent of clean earth that emerged as the carpet of leaves was removed, hand by hand. The work proceeded at the pace his body knew, without jolts, when a minuscule sudden sound broke the rustling's monotony. It wasn't on the ground, it was high up, a different rustling, more tense, coming from somewhere in the fig tree's higher, darker branches. Uncle Adenor paused with his hand halfway to the basket. His fingers still held a half leaf. He didn't immediately raise his head. He simply froze his posture, eyes half closed, ears trying to capture the sound's origin in the vastness of the invisible canopy. The entire night seemed to hold its breath with him. The sound repeated, a scraping of tiny claws against the thick bark of a branch, followed by a muffled short beat of wings. A night bird, perhaps a small owl or a potu, shifting position on its hidden perch. The bird's movement caused a small disturbance in the air above, a subtle tremor that propagated through the wood until it reached the tip of a more fragile branch. From that branch, a single leaf detached. The old carpenter, still motionless, heard the sound of the leaf falling even before seeing it. It was a sound of the lightest friction, the leaf scraping against the other still attached leaves as it plunged vertically. It entered the oil lamp's circle of light, spinning on its own axis in a slow, spiraling motion, as if gravity had lost half its strength. The yellow light captured the leaf's ochre tone mid-air, highlighting its irregular edges and thin, twisted stem. It descended, dancing in the still air, passing centimeters from his face, brushing almost imperceptibly against the shoulder of his flannel shirt, and landed with absolute delicacy precisely on the dark earth he had just cleaned. A silent, perfect landing in the center of an empty space. He looked at the newly fallen leaf. It looked different from the others that had been on the ground for days. It had a residual sheen,
a slightly more vibrant color, less weathered by sun and dew. He released the old leaf he held in the basket and with a slow movement stretched his arm towards the newcomer. At touching it, he confirmed his visual suspicion. It still held a minuscule flexibility at its center, a tactile memory of sap that hadn't yet fully dried. The stem was a little greener at the base. He held it by the tip, observing the pattern of its veins against the oil lamp's light.
That small event, the solitary fall and precise landing, brought a natural pause to the work. He straightened his back slowly, feeling his lumbar vertebrae settle with a mute click. He brought his free hand to the base of his spine, pressing his knuckles against the tense muscles, and made a small rotational movement with his shoulders. The pre-dawn air filled his lungs forcefully. He released the air through his nose, a warm puff that formed an invisible mist in the night's cold. He looked around. The yard remained immersed in shadows. The outlines of neighboring houses beyond the wall were just dark blocks against a slightly less dark sky. The new leaf was placed in the basket, landing softly on the mountain of old, dried leaves. It rested there on top, reigning solitary over the brown straw, until he bent again to resume his task. The interruption had lasted only a second, a minute perhaps, but it was enough for his body to register the pause and renew its readiness. He dragged the wicker basket a little more to the right, its woven bottom scraping against the packed earth with a rough sound that seemed immense in the stillness of that hour. He positioned himself before a new patch of accumulated leaves near a root that formed a natural step on the ground. His fingers returned to the pinching work: pick up, lift, release. The rhythm was resumed, but now it seemed a little lighter, as if the pause had oiled the invisible gears of movement. A small moth, attracted by the light, began to fly in irregular circles around the oil lamp's warm glass on the stone bench. Its brown wings beat frantically against the glass, making a tiny drumming sound, a tick-tick-tick that joined the rustling of leaves in the basket. He noticed the insect's presence from the corner of his eye, but made no move to shoo it away. There was room for everyone in the stillness of that hour. The light in the yard began to undergo an almost invisible alteration for anyone not paying attention. It wasn't yet clear dawn, but that transitional moment with the sky still navy blue, when darkness loses its absolute density and things begin to gain contours that don't rely solely on the oil lamp's light. The blackness of the sky above the fig tree's canopy diluted into a slate tone, a very dark bluish gray that hinted at the presence of some thin clouds stretched across the horizon. The air seemed to grow a degree colder, that sharp chill that always precedes sunrise and makes the skin prickle beneath clothing. Uncle Adenor perceived the change not by looking up, but by looking at the ground. The dome of yellow light projected by the oil lamp on the stone bench seemed to have shrunken a little or lost its contrasting strength. The edges of the illuminated circle, which were once sharp against the darkness of the lawn, now blended more softly with the surrounding gloom. He adjusted the collar of his flannel shirt, pulling it up a little higher on his neck to block the fine wind that was beginning to blow low. The work of gathering leaves maintained its repetitive gesture. He reached an area near the edge of the canopy where the fig tree's leaves mingled with some tiny leaves from a neighbor's atarola bush, which the wind had carried over the wall. The atarola leaves were small, oval, and pale yellow, too tiny to be picked one by one. He had to change tactics. He brought the fingers of both hands together,
forming a shallow scoop, and scraped the earth's surface with the sides of his pinky fingers, pushing the mixture of large and small leaves to form a small mound. The friction of his skin against the cold, rough earth was a familiar sensation, a natural sandpaper that cleaned the impurities of his nails.
As he formed the small mound with cupped hands, the change of light brought an old perception to the surface. He observed how the color of the dry leaves seemed different now under this mixed light of oil lamp and nascent dawn. The brown that once seemed uniform and opaque now revealed nuances of copper, rust, and old gold. This observation reminded him of the woods he worked with in the workshop. He remembered how cedar seemed like ordinary wood, uninteresting under the raw midday light, but gained an orange, almost living depth when the late afternoon light struck the sanded board at an angle. The light revealed the hidden truth in dead things. The cut wood, the fallen leaf, both seemed lifeless until the right light touched them, showing that the beauty of matter didn't disappear with the end of sap, it merely changed its nature. He picked up the small mound of mixed leaves with both hands, pressing lightly so the smaller ones wouldn't escape between his fingers, and deposited all into the basket. The wicker level was already dangerously close to the brim. He needed to sink both open hands into the mass of leaves, pressing with the weight of his shoulders. The sound of crushing was intense, a collective crackle of hundreds of veins breaking simultaneously to yield space. The moth continued its erratic dance around the oil lamp on the stone bench. Now, with the ambient light subtly brightening, the insect's shadow cast on the ground was no longer as sharp. Uncle looked at the oil lamp's glass. The flame inside seemed smaller, less necessary, though it continued burning with the same intensity as before. The smell of kerosene was still present, but the fine wind now brought a new scent, the smell of dew slowly evaporating from the pitanya leaves and sparse lawn. It was the scent of morning announcing itself before truly arriving. He dragged the heavy basket closer to the trunk, feeling the wicker's resistance against the earth. The dirty area was considerably shrinking. Only a half-moon of accumulated leaves remained on the side opposite the stone bench, an area that lay in the tree's thickest shadow. He walked over, his steps slow and measured, his boots crushing a few stray leaves along the way. He positioned himself facing the new patch, bent his knees once more, feeling the familiar crack in his joints, and lowered his hands to the ground. The sky's light continued its slow dilution of the dark, drop by drop, as he gathered the next handful. The gathering work entered its densest, quietest phase, a moment when the old carpenter's mind detached from the mechanical action of his hands and traveled paths only repetition allows access to. His fingers continued pinching, lifting, and dropping leaves into the almost full basket, but his eyes no longer saw only earth and straw. His vision was turned inward, activated by the constant contact with the rough, crevice-filled bark of the fig tree roots that he needed to navigate with his hands to clean the most difficult corners. The rough, crevice-filled texture of that living wood beneath his fingers was the trigger for an entire structured and vivid memory to unfold at the rhythm of his craft. He remembered the day that tree ceased to be merely a promise in a clay pot, before becoming an anchor in the yard. It was a long time ago. The house still smelled of fresh paint and glazer's putty on the windows. The yard was just a square of bare earth, disturbed and marked by the mason's boots. Teresa had brought the fig tree sapling from the nursery in the neighboring town. The sapling was no more than a thick twig with 3 or 4 shy green leaves at the tip, stuck in a clod of black earth tied in a damp burlap sack. She carried the package against her chest, protecting the leaves from the wind, with a smile that blended pride and expectation.
He had dug the hole, exactly that same spot where he was now crouched. He remembered the weight of the shovel cutting through the compacted earth, the metallic sound of the blade hitting a hidden stone, the sweat dripping down his forehead on a warm November afternoon. Teresa stood beside him, holding the sapling by its thin stem with both hands while he widened the pit. When the hole was deep enough, he released the shovel and knelt on the earth. She lowered the sapling slowly, centering the clod of earth at the bottom. "Hold it straight," he had said, his voice muffled by the effort. And she held it, firm, her eyes fixed on the small green leaves, while he pushed the loose earth back with his hands, shaped like a shovel, covering the roots, pressing the soil around the stem to avoid air pockets. As he tamped the earth around the freshly planted sapling, Teresa had knelt beside him. She didn't wear gloves. Her hands, smaller and softer than his, also touched the earth, smoothing the surface of the newly formed mound in a gesture of tenderness and completion. "It will cover the wall," Teresa said, her voice full of unwavering certainty. He had looked at the thin twig and then at the distant masonry wall, silently doubting, but said nothing. He simply picked up the zinc watering can and slowly poured water over the soft earth, watching the dark mud form and swallow the liquid. The memory flowed as his hands, in the present, continued the work. He pulled a handful of dry leaves that were caught in a deep crevice between 2 gigantic roots that now looked like the legs of a prehistoric monster embedded in the ground. The thin twig had transformed into that. The promise to cover the wall had been fulfilled and surpassed. The tree had grown, thickened, twisted its branches in search of sun, and now dominated the space with a silent authority. The passage of time was not an abstract concept for him. It was measured in wood rings within that trunk, in centimeters of shadow that stretched each summer, and in the absurd quantity of leaves the tree shed each cycle. He felt no sadness remembering Teresa holding the sapling. He felt only the solidity of the fact. She had been there. The tree was there. He was there, gathering what the tree released. It was a continuous chain of events, a slow and perfect mechanism that required no lament, only maintenance. His right hand plunged deep into the wicker basket to accommodate the new handful, feeling the heat generated by the incipient decomposition of the leaves at the bottom of the pile. The scent of wet earth and the past mingled in the pre-dawn air. The half-moon of leaves accumulated in the shadow was already almost disappearing. The packed earth floor revealed itself, clean, dark, with the subtle marks of his fingers drawn in the fine dust like small tracks of a methodical animal. He let out a long sigh, filling his chest with cold air, and blinked his eyes a few times to clear the mist of memory and refocus on the texture of the dry leaf he had just picked up. The leaf was torn in half, dusty. He dropped it into the basket. The tree remained standing, vast and heavy above him, oblivious to memory, existing only in its present of wood and sap, the work called to be finished. The act of gathering leaves approached its natural end. Uncle Adenor perceived this not by mental count, but by visually reading the ground. The vast expanse of earth beneath the fig tree's canopy, which once was covered by a dense, chaotic carpet of brown and copper, now displayed its dark, bare skin. Only small tufts of stubborn leaves resisted at the extreme edges, leaning against the masonry wall's baseboard or hidden in the tightest crevices of the gigantic roots. The wicker basket, in turn, was overflowing. The dry leaves formed an irregular dome above the woven rim, threatening to spill over the sides with any sudden movement.
He paused the movement of his hands for an instant and rested his forearms on his bent knees. His entire body gently complained of the continuous effort. There was a dull ache in his thigh muscles, a concentrated weight at the base of his lumbar spine, and a slight numbness in his fingertips, stained with dry earth and foliage dust. He accepted these physical sensations not as pain, but the fair receipt for a job well done by hand. He straightened his back very slowly, uncoiling his spine vertebra by vertebra until he stood fully upright. His knee joints cracked loudly in the stillness of the yard, a sound of old wood adjusting. From his full height, standing, he had a complete view of the result. The contrast was evident. On one side, beyond the imaginary line the tree's canopy drew on the ground, the sparse lawn still held some leaves scattered by the wind, awaiting the broom that would come another time. On the other, under the fig tree's dominion, the packed earth was impeccable, swept by hand, clean of any debris larger than a grain of sand. The tree's thick, sinuous roots looked like prominent veins on the black earth, now fully visible, drawing winding paths that vanished into the dark. The organization of the space brought immediate visual peace. The chaos had been contained, gathered, and placed inside a basket. Only the final details remained. He walked with short, heavy steps to the base of the exposed brick wall, where the wind usually pushed leaves and created small eddies of dirt. He didn't bring the basket. It was too heavy to drag without spilling its contents. He went with only his hands free. He bent again, ignoring the silent protest of his lower back, and used the side of his right hand as an improvised shovel. He scraped the junction of the wall with the ground, gathering a fine mixture of broken leaves, tiny twigs, sand, and old spider webs. The texture was rough and crumbly against the skin of his palm. He gathered the small mound in the cup of his two hands and walked back to the basket, balancing the load so the fine sand wouldn't slip between his fingers. Reaching the overflowing container, he didn't simply toss the dirt on top. Carefully, he opened a small hole in the dome of dry leaves, pushing the larger ones to the edges, and poured the fine mixture into the center of the basket, letting the sand and fragments settle to the bottom of the basket by gravity. Then he covered the hole again with the larger leaves, smoothing the top of the pile with the palm of his hand to compact everything one last time. The rustling sound was muffled and definitive. The surrounding light no longer depended on the oil lamp. The sky had brightened enough to reveal the dark green color of the living leaves high up in the fig tree and the rough gray of the cement on the wall. The early morning was in its last gasps before the first light touched the back wall. The cold air seemed to have gained a new humidity, a freshness of clean water that washed his lungs with each deep breath. The old carpenter cleaned his hands by clapping them together, a dry friction gesture that sent a small cloud of brown dust flying, illuminated by the oil lamp's faint light on the stone bench. The dust danced in the air for a second before settling on the clean earth. He looked at his own hands. His palms were marked with lines of earth ingrained in the creases of his skin. His dull nails held half-moons of dark dirt, and his knuckles were slightly reddened by the cold and constant friction. They were hands that told the story of that last hour. He rubbed his thumbs against the tips of his forefingers, feeling the residual roughness, and let his arms fall loosely along his body. The work beneath the tree was done. The earth was clean. The basket was full. The daily cycle of order against the tree's natural disorder had been completed without haste, in precisely the time it needed to last.
Uncle Adenor bent down one last time, not to gather anything from the ground, but to grasp the thick handle of the wicker basket. His fingers wrapped around the woven straw, feeling the material's firmness. He lifted the container with a fluid motion, using the strength of his legs instead of his back. The basket was heavy, a dense, fluffy weight, the accumulated weight of thousands of leaves that had lost their sap. He walked with slow steps to the base of the fig tree's main trunk, where there was a small natural recess between two immense roots. He rested the basket there, fitting it perfectly into the cradle of living wood. The dry leaves would rest there until it was time to be taken to the compost pile at the back of the property, a task for the morning sun. Free of the weight, he walked back to the soapstone bench. The oil lamp continued to burn, but its yellow flame now seemed weak, pale, and irrelevant against the gray light that filled the yard. The sky was no longer navy blue. It was a pale blue, almost white on the horizon line beyond the neighboring roofs. The outlines of the pitanga leaves, the lawn, the wall, and the fig tree itself were sharp, bathed in that cold, shadowless light that precedes sunrise. The distant, sharp, solitary call of a great kiskakad sounded, cutting through the village's thick silence. He stopped before the oil lamp. The warmth emanating from the glass was a minimal comfort against the icy air that struck his chest. With the thumb and forefinger of his right hand, he reached for the small metal side gear. He turned it slowly downward, retracting the kerosene-soaked wick into the reservoir. The yellow flame shrank, trembled one last time, resisting for a fraction of a second, and extinguished completely. A small, thin ribbon of gray smoke rose through the glass tube, escaping through the top opening and dissolving into the cold air. The acrid, strong smell of the freshly extinguished wick replaced the sweet aroma of continuous burning. It was the scent of the night shift's end. The old carpenter didn't pick up the oil lamp immediately. He left it there on the damp stone bench and stood, hands tucked into his pajama pants beneath his flannel shirt. His body was warmed by the work, his heart beating in a calm, steady rhythm. His eyes scanned the clean ground, the dark, leveled earth, the wicker basket nestled among the roots, and climbed the thick trunk until they were lost in the fig tree's green immensity. The tree was silent, motionless in the absence of wind, majestic in its ancient presence. The work was done, and the night had passed. He remained there still, feeling the soles of his boots firm on the clean earth as the first true ray of light touched the top of the brick wall.